Hey, I'm Paul, a late diagnosed autistic human being from France living in the UK. I make videos about my personal experience as a late diagnosed autistic person, and this video is me taking the Aspie quiz. I'm on a roll today. I just recorded the part two of my Stim toy collection, and I thought I just want to keep making videos. So a while ago I made a video called Autistic Person Takes Autism Tests. I basically took the AQ test and the CAT-Q test in that video, if you want to go and watch it, and then shared my scores with you guys, and then you guys took the tests as well and left your scores in the comments, which was really cool. So I thought we could do that again today. I wanted to take the RADS-R test, but then I'm not a fan of it because, you know, if you remember, if you've taken that test before, it basically asks you for each question if it's true now, or only when you were a kid, or if it's true now and when you were a kid, or if it was never true. And I think it's just very confusing, and a lot of people seem to think so because I checked the ratings. So all of those tests are on Embrace Autism, which is a great resource that I've talked about before, and they basically have ratings for each of those tests of like how accurate they are, how clear or ambiguous they are, easy to understand, things like that. And it has a really bad rating. So I thought, actually, let's do the Aspie quiz instead. And because it is super long, that will probably, you know, make a pretty long video in itself. So I'm gonna take the Aspie quiz, and then you can take it as well, and leave your scores in the comments if you want. So like I did last time, I have I'm recording my laptop screen, so I have my questions here because I'm recording on my phone. So this is what the Aspie quiz website looks like. It looks like it was made in 2002. Oh, here we go, 2004. So it's not, you know, the first time you see it you're like, okay. But it's actually a really good test, so go directly to the test. I accept. Okay, so the first thing it asks is a bunch of questions about you, year of birth. I might not show this part because like it's a little bit private. But basically it asks your year of birth, month of birth, sex, gender, country, your ancestry, and then some optional questions about if you've already been diagnosed with a neurodivergence or anything like that. I'm not going to answer those because I don't want to influence the test. It asks you autism/ASD/Asperger/HFA, no idea what that is. And you can say no, or suspect, self-diagnosed, or professional diagnosis. And then it asks the same thing for ADD, ADHD, OCD, and social phobia. So here we go. Okay, so there are 119 questions. It says, disclaimer, this questionnaire should not be taken as a substitute for professional evaluation. Some of the questions in this quiz are phrased so that an atypical, in parentheses, autistic/neurodiverse/Aspie response is yes, and some so that an atypical response is no. Okay. So that means you can't know what answer they're looking for, which prevents you from influencing the results of the test, I imagine. So let's get into it because we're already 5 minutes into the video and this is a long test. Okay, so the first question is, do you accept criticism, correction, and direction? And then you can choose don't know, no never, a little, yes often. So I used to be notoriously bad at receiving criticism. Notoriously bad. But since then I grew up and I did a master's degree, and I realized how important criticism could be, like constructive criticism, and that it's essential to any piece of work. So I would say, but I still, I still struggle with it sometimes. So I'm gonna say a little. Is it difficult to pass on messages correctly? So I like to think that I have a pretty good, hearing memory, audio memory. I have a good memory of the things that I hear. So no, never. It's never difficult to pass on messages correctly. Is your sense of humor different from mainstream or considered odd? Yes, so family members would often, when I got with my partner, because we have kind of the same sense of humor. We're both autistic, by the way. My partner was diagnosed last week, so it's official now. And we have our own sense of humor that nobody else can understand, pretty much, in our, in our family circle and stuff. And so family members would often look at us when we were making, jokes and stuff like that and be like, you two go so well together, like you really found each other because you have the same sense of humor, and people couldn't understand our sense of humor. So yeah, I would say so. Would I say? Yeah, let's go with yes. Do you rock back and forth or side to side for comfort, to calm yourself when excited or overstimulated? So yes, when I first filled out this questionnaire a few months ago, when I was on my diagnosis journey, I might have answered no or a little, but since then I've been really tapping into my intuitive stims and rediscovering what they are and what feels natural. And I've been getting back to rocking. I actually remembered rocking when I was younger, and then I stopped doing it because I didn't want to look weird masking. But recently I've really started to really rock again, back and forth or side to side. So I'm gonna say yes. Are you asexual? So I would say I'm definitely on the asexual spectrum. So I'm gonna put 1. Will you abandon your friends if your activities or ideals clash? So abandon your friends sounds a bit harsh. If your activities or ideals clash. In terms of the activities, I don't know, because most of the friends I've had passions and hobbies that I didn't necessarily share, and that was okay. But ideals, as someone who has a strong morals, I consider myself to have like a lot of autistic people, I have a very strong sense of right and wrong and sense of justice. And so if a friend were to start having political ideals or stuff like that didn't align with my values, I mean, I don't know if we could stay friends. Like if that friend were to start aligning with the far right, for example, and start being really racist, or I don't know if I would still hang out with them, you know what I mean? So I'm gonna say a little. Are you sensitive to changes in humidity and air pressure? So I don't know exactly what they mean by sensitive, but my body reacts differently to the changes in humidity. Like my skin is pretty sensitive. For example, these past couple of years, whenever I went to, I don't know why it didn't do it as much before that, but I've really been noticing these past couple of years, whenever I go to Switzerland in the winter, because the air is so dry compared to here in the UK, my skin gets so dry, and like it peels and it cracks, and my lips are all chapped, and even like it affects my throat. My throat becomes really dry, and I've even had nosebleeds because of that. I would say yes, but I'm gonna say a little, just to be on the safe side. I don't want to over exaggerate because I'm not sure how sensitive I am to air pressure. I definitely don't like, I definitely can't wear those earbuds that, the noise cancelling earbuds, like the AirPods, for example. They have different settings, and you have, I think it's the noise cancelling setting. I don't know, one of the settings. I can't use it because it's just, I don't know. I don't know if it's the air pressure or what, but it's so uncomfortable. I don't use any settings, which kind of defeats the purpose of those, of the AirPods, but I just don't like it. Do you enjoy traditional dating? So I haven't done a lot of traditional dating. In case you don't know, I'm 27. I met my partner when I was 18 and he was 21. We actually met online through a dating app. He was in Switzerland, I was in France, and we've been together ever since. So I only dated a little bit, a few guys before him that were all absolute douchebags. No, I don't. I can't say I particularly enjoyed it, meeting guys and stuff, because I have so much social anxiety. Whenever I have to meet new people, it's not a very enjoyable experience. So I'm gonna say no. Do you find it difficult to engage in a task of no interest to you, even if it's important? Yeah, that's something I really struggle with. It's one of the reasons why I struggle to keep jobs. I struggle to work for other people, clients and stuff, and I always try and gear the project. So I used to do freelance editing and ghostwriting and fiction writing, things like that. So I would work for individual, private clients, and then companies who, like those kinds of companies that publish those cheap romantic novels, romance novels, things like that. And they hire freelance writers, they don't pay them enough, and then they have super high expectations of them, which I don't know how people can sustain work in that kind of environment, because I didn't last very long. I was they didn't keep me for very long, because I was brutally honest with the writers whose work I was editing. So yeah, I really struggled to do tasks that I'm not interested in. And so whenever I would work for a client like that on a freelance project, I would always manage to gear the project in a direction that I liked. I don't know how obvious it was to the client. It might have been more obvious than I thought it was, because I really struggled to keep work going. So I'm gonna say a little, because I'm still able to do important tasks I'm not interested in. Although the question is, do you find it difficult? So I'm gonna say yes. I really struggled with homework at school when I just wasn't interested in that. Like, I either had subjects in school where I was absolutely passionate about it, and so it didn't feel like work, or subjects I didn't care about and I really struggled to do the work. Do you have obsessive attachments to animate objects? Okay, so this, I wasn't sure about what they mean by that. Something that is animate has life, in contrast to things like stones and machines which do not. Can you give an example? The sun, moon, and stars are animate, and so are rocks. You just said stones are not animate, and now you're saying they are. I'm not sure about the definition of animate. At its most basic, animate means simply alive, while inanimate means not living, not moving around. But animate also means spirited or brought to life. Okay, so I'm not sure what they mean. If they mean living things, or I guess an electronic toy could be considered an animate object because it like does stuff and moves. I'm gonna say a little, because if that's what they mean, I definitely had that. I mean, I definitely have that even as an adult. Like, I have obsessions with like Tamagotchi and things like that that come and go. So obsessive attachment, yeah, I'm gonna say a little. Do you enjoy big events even if they're crowded? Okay, so this is gonna be an automatic no. I'm only on question 11 and it's been 20 minutes, so I don't know how long this video is gonna be. Have you experienced stronger than normal attachments to certain people? I don't know what they mean by stronger than normal attachment. I've definitely had obsessions with people, so I'm gonna say yes. Is your sense of humor fairly conventional? It's kind of similar to one of the first questions they asked. I'm gonna say a little, because I still understand mainstream humor, and I'm able to make mainstream humor that people understand, because one of my main masks growing up was making people laugh. But I definitely also have like more unconventional humor, so I'm gonna say a little. Do you realize hours later that somebody that you have a romantic interest for actually showed interest for you and then feel bad about the missed opportunity to connect? So a lot of these questions I find are really hard if you're just starting to figure out that you're autistic, or you're trying to figure out, because like sometimes like you've never asked yourself these questions, or you've never realized that, and then they ask you the question and you're like, hang on, I need to think about that for a minute. And then you start, revisiting your life story, and you're like, oh yeah, I remember that time when, this in particular I've never experienced, because I've definitely, there have definitely been times when one guy or two in my entire life was kind of flirting with me, and I didn't realize it. But the question is someone you have a romantic interest for, and I didn't have a romantic interest for these people, so. And then feel bad about the missed opportunity to connect. So that's a very specific example. I've never experienced this specifically, but I have experienced situations where someone flirted with me and I didn't understand it, or so yeah, I'm gonna say a little. Do you find it easy to describe your feelings? I do have what's called alexithymia, where it's difficult for me to figure out what I'm feeling, what emotions I'm feeling. No, I don't think it's very easy. Like, I often, when I'm talking with my partner and stuff, and he's asking how I'm doing, I'm like, when I'm not doing too well, especially, I'm like, I don't know what I'm feeling. Like, I'm always saying, like, I don't know what's going on with me. Like, I'm confused. So I'm gonna say no, I don't find it easy. You tend to look a lot at people you like and little or not at all at people you dislike. So yeah, that describes me so well. So I'm always staring at my partner. Like, he's told me in the past that he found that a little uncomfortable, but I didn't realize it. And like on our first weekend together, I remember we spent an entire afternoon laying in bed, just staring into each other's eyes. And I don't think I'd ever stared into someone's eyes that much. And that's one of the main ways I like to connect with him, is by looking at him. Not necessarily staring into his eyes, but like generally looking at him. Like, for example, at restaurant, he's the only person that I don't like to sit next to at restaurants and stuff. For example, I like to sit in front of him so I can look at him. Whereas with everybody else, I'm like, I'd rather sit next to you so we don't have to look at each other. So, and like the people I don't like, I especially struggle to look at them. Like, for example, our landlady is a really shit person, to be honest. And she doesn't like me and I don't like her. And it's very clear between us. And whenever she comes here, I really struggle to look at her. Really struggle. I'll usually like stare at my phone or something, and like it makes me look kind of rude or disrespectful. But yeah, I struggle with that. Are you shy? So yeah, my whole life I've been described as shy. Even as a kid, I was like painfully shy, couldn't talk to strangers or anything like that. Do you tend to interpret things literally? So yes, definitely. Again, it's one of the things that became clearer to me over the last few months, figuring myself out, getting my diagnosis. I didn't necessarily realize how literally I took things, but yeah, whether it is humor, sarcasm, or just the way people will say things, I take it very literally. Like everything in life, I take very literally. Like a recent example is of that was when I was watching the last season of The Circle, which I didn't really like, on Netflix. At one point, they asked the contestants to find within their albums, their photo albums, they had to find a photo of the moment they felt the most alive in their life. And obviously what they implied was to find a picture of yourself that comes across as in a certain way for like the image you're trying to show to people of yourself, you know. But I took it literally, and I was like starting in my head, I was starting to think, oh my god, what was the moment in my life when I was the most alive? And I was like taking it way too far and thinking about it, overthinking it. And then I realized nobody was doing that. They were all like, so I'm gonna choose that picture because it shows me doing this, so people are gonna think that. And I was like, oh, okay, they don't actually mean the moment in your life when you were the most alive. They don't actually mean it, you know? So I do take things very literally indeed. Do you notice odors that other people don't seem to notice? I mentioned that in my last video on my sensory sensitivities, but for example, there was that time where my father-in-law's dog was chewing a bone, and the stench was so horrible, and like everyone in the room seemed okay with it. Like it didn't bother them that much. They were able to have a conversation, and I was suffocating. I was like, can we do something about that bone? And they were like, yeah, right. And I was like, how could you not notice? Do you tend to express your feelings in ways that may baffle others? Yeah, so because I struggle to express my feelings and be vulnerable with people, I like to show the affection I have for them in ways that don't necessarily involve words, because that makes me uncomfortable. So I might not show a lot of affection or warmth toward that person, but I will show them I care a lot about them by buying something that I know they really love, and it's like a very niche thing that they mentioned five years ago, but I'll remember and be like, okay, I know they really like that, so I'll show them how important they are to me by giving them that, or like doing things for them. Showing through my actions rather than words is what I'm trying to say. So I guess I'm gonna say a little. Do you like to walk behind people you're attached to? I definitely don't like to be followed. I don't like it when people walk behind me. Do I like walking behind the people I'm attached to? I generally don't like, I like it when I'm walking next to the person, not behind or in front of. So, because when I walk behind someone and they struggle to hear me and I struggle to hear them, like, no, I'm gonna say no. Have others told you that you have an odd posture or gait? I don't think so. I don't think people have ever told me that. I mean, I explained that in several of my videos, but I definitely sit in weird positions, and yeah, the way I sit tends to confuse people because it's kind of unusual and it doesn't look comfortable to them and stuff like that. So, but I don't think that's what they're asking here. So I'm gonna say no. Do you avoid talking because you cannot reliably predict how others will react, especially strangers? I mean, I definitely avoid talking at all costs, especially around strangers, but is it because I can't predict how they're gonna react? I'm gonna say a little, because I definitely avoid talking to strangers, but I'm not sure about the reason why. Do you like to create routines for things you've figured out so you don't have to figure it out again? So yeah, definitely, like that's something that, for example, that my father, who I suspect is autistic like me, he has routines and rituals for everything, and he would always tell me like, I have figured out the best way of doing this thing, the optimal way, and so why would I do it differently? And it would be very precise, and it's very ritualized, and it's the same thing every day. So it's not that extreme, but I feel like as I get older, I resemble my dad more and more. I definitely have things where like I have a very specific way of doing this thing that I have figured out through trial and error, and I have no reason of doing it differently now that I have figured out the best way of doing it. So I'm gonna say yes. Do you have a good sense of time? Yeah, I like to think so. I don't have ADHD. My partner has ADHD, has a terrible sense of time, but I don't. When you listen to music, can you get so caught up in it that you don't notice anything else? So I used to listen to music a lot. When I was younger, I was really into music, and it was a really intense experience for me, listening to music. Like, it was a whole body experience. These days, I don't listen to music as much anymore, but when I really listened to it when I was younger, would I get so caught up in it that I didn't notice anything else? I'm gonna say a little, because I don't know that I don't remember situations where I didn't, like, there was something I needed to notice and I didn't because I was so caught up in music, but like I was really living the music, you know? Do you have problems finding your way to new places? Oh yeah, so yeah, that's a big issue of mine. Even though I have Google Maps, I have an iPhone, I really struggle to find my way to places. And that's why and especially if I'm stressed, if I'm anxious, I lose those skills even more. And I have like I mentioned in my video on sensory sensitivities, I have an awful sense of direction and navigation. So yeah, definitely. Do you expect other people to know your thoughts, experiences, and opinions without you having to tell them? So that's an interesting one that I noticed, especially when it comes to my traumatic experiences. I definitely expected people to get it without me having to explain it to them, which is really strange, I know that, but I realized it. Basically, that question put that feeling into words for me, and then I was like, huh, yeah, I do that, don't I? So, and you know, whenever I'm not doing too well or not, I'm like, I get irritated very quickly when people don't seem to, like, I get frustrated when people don't get what I'm feeling, what I'm experiencing, and I'm like, obviously they can't read my mind. I have to, you know, tell them. You have a good sense of how much pressure to apply when doing things with your hands. I like to think so, yeah. Can things that might seem meaningless to others make sense to you? Meaningless to others? I'm gonna say a little. I'm not sure what they mean by meaningless, but there are definitely things that most people don't care about that I care about a lot, and that makes sense to me. Do you or used to have imaginary relationships? Yeah, I definitely had imaginary friends when I was a kid, and even like when I got older as a teenager and stuff, I would have like relationships with fictional characters or celebrities in my head. So yeah, that's embarrassing, but yeah, definitely. Are you often delighted by small things like the colors in soap bubbles and the 5-pointed star shape that appears when you cut an apple across the coal? Yes, so I'm that kind of person who's, you know, who notices the little things and tends to like, you know, be like, hey, did you see that? See how cool it is? And most people are like, yeah, whatever. Have you sensed that somebody was around you even when you couldn't see anybody? Sensing is like sensing someone's presence. I'm gonna say a little, because that's definitely happened. I wouldn't say it happens often. To have a fascination for slowly flowing water. I remember like when I was younger, really, well, still to this day, really, I like to watch things aunts, you know, going about their life. I like to watch that. Or I remember as a teenager having a really intense emotional experience watching raindrops roll down the window of the bus that I was on. And then I got home and I told my parents, and my mom was like, can't relate. But yeah, I do get amazed by things like that. But I'm gonna say a little, because do I have specifically a fascination for slowly flowing water? I don't know. I'm gonna say a little. Did you feel lonely as a child? I definitely did. Well, I was an only child, first of all, in a pretty remote environment, and because I didn't have many friends, I wasn't very popular at school. I did feel pretty lonely at times, although even though I had a huge imagination and I was always playing and I was never bored, I remember, you know, being like, I wish I had siblings, you know? So yeah. Do you tend to shut down or have a meltdown when stressed or overwhelmed? Yes. Definitely. I've talked about this before on my channel, but yeah, when it gets too much emotionally, I'll have meltdowns, yeah, or shutdowns if I'm not at home or in a safe place, where I struggle to speak and stuff like that. Do you feel you have to be on your guard even with friends? I guess that relates to masking. So the idea of never being completely relaxed and myself, even around friends, I definitely experienced that. Yes. Do you cry about nothing? Yeah, I cry very easily. Not about nothing though, like things that most people wouldn't cry about, definitely. Do you instinctively become frightened by the sound of a motorbike? Yeah, that's pretty harsh sound. It's pretty yeah, it's pretty brutal. I'm gonna say yeah. Is it hard for you to see why some things upset people so much? I definitely have times like that, especially when I'm watching reality TV, which is, I didn't like reality TV when I was younger, but I got into it as I got older. And to me, it's kind of like watching a wildlife documentary almost, because it's like I'm watching a different species. That sounds so weird, but like, because most of the time it's very, very stereotypical, neurotypical people that are on these shows that are very outgoing, very confident, and like they care about money and like, you know, which is basically the exact opposite of who I am. So I find it interesting to kind of see the diversity in human beings and stuff like that. But a lot of the time they get upset about things and I'm like, aren't you exaggerating a bit? And then here I am crying because I killed an ant. So I'm gonna say a little, because most of the time when people are upset, I can see why. But it does happen where I'm like, huh. Do you usually find faults with opinions that you don't share? So I really have a hard time understanding that people might have opinions that are drastically different from mine because I have such strong opinions. I would say so, yeah. I have a hard time like agreeing to disagree kind of thing, whatever that means. Do you prefer to construct your own set of spiritual beliefs rather than following existing religions / belief systems? Yeah, definitely. I've never really, well, I was raised in an atheist family and I consider myself an agnostic. I don't really buy the religions and things like that. I think they're social constructs, which I made a whole video about social constructs recently. Do you practice what you want to say in conversations? I'm gonna say a bit, because I do script, although don't script as much as some other autistic people. I feel like I've talked about my mask and I made a whole video about masking, but I don't care that much about, like, I'm high masking in certain aspects and in others I'm like, I don't really care. I don't care enough to make an effort, to be honest. So like, but I do script some things. Like I have had times where, especially before making phone calls and stuff, I would write down everything I had to say. I just struggled to follow it in the moment or like remember. But like, yeah, I've definitely had times where I would practice a conversation or things like that. It just rarely goes the way that you wanted it to. So, do you have an urge to observe the habits of humans and or animals? Yes. So that's like, I've always been fascinated with documentaries, wildlife documentaries, and like, I remember as a kid I thought like, why don't we have like these kinds of documentaries but as with humans as the subject, and like studying human beings in their natural habitat. And like, I kind of like imagined a kind of wildlife documentary on humans seen from the perspective of aliens or something that would look at us like we look at zebras and stuff, you know. So yeah, I have a curiosity when it comes to, well, animals for sure. Like I wanted to be a vet for the first 15 years of my life. Do you need to do things yourself in order to remember them? I definitely think that it helps a lot when you do things yourself rather than just being told. That's a better way to learn. So I'm gonna say a little bit. Are you bothered by clothes, tags, or light touch? So I have been bothered by tags in the past, but I wouldn't say it's something I hugely struggle with. Light touch, like I mentioned in my sensory sensitivities video, I'm very, very ticklish, and I generally don't like physical contact that much. So I'm gonna say a little, because it's not like I'm trying to downplay my autistic traits. Basically, in a conversation you tend to focus on your own thoughts rather than on what your listener might be thinking. No, not at all. I don't think about my own thoughts at all when I'm in a conversation. I'm like trying to get on the same wavelength as the person I'm talking to, and trying to figure out what they think. Like I basically like, it's like I'm trying, instead of being connected to my own thoughts, I'm trying to connect to the other person's brain and thoughts, you know? If there's an interruption, can you quickly return to what you were doing before? I would say it depends. In the past, I would have had an easier time with it when I had like better cognitive skills. But because I've been in burnout for a while, like I struggle with that more. So I would say a little, because it depends on the context. Do you have problems with timing in conversations? Yeah, so I often like will have something to say and it takes all of my focus to not interrupt the person I'm talking with. Let them finish their thought. I don't know, I just find it difficult to, especially in group conversations and stuff, to slide what I wanted to say into the conversation. Usually I miss the opportunity and then other people's are talking and the subject changes and I like haven't had time to say what I wanted to say. And like, yeah, I do struggle that. And like when I'm on the phone, I will often speak over other people. Do you instinctively know when it's your turn to speak when talking on the phone? Here we go. So I'm gonna say a little, because I kind of do, but also like I notice that I often speak over other people. So do you bite your lip, cheek, or tongue when thinking, when anxious or nervous? Yeah. It's actually a stim that I developed more recently, in the past year or so, where I will bite the inside of my lower lip. Do you have extra sensitive hearing? I would say a little. I would say, again, I made a whole video on sensory sensitivities. My hearing is pretty sensitive. Do you like to protect people you're attached to even when they didn't ask for it? Yeah, I definitely do that thing of like speaking up. Like whenever I see an injustice or something like that, I can't help speaking up, even though it's not a good idea. Yeah, I'll definitely like speak up on behalf of other people and like defend them, and like they didn't ask for it, you know? So yeah, that's something I definitely do. Do you get confused by several verbal instructions at the same time? It depends. Again, like when I was younger, when my mind was sharper, I didn't struggle with it as much. Although when I was in class, I would often be like, I don't know if it's because I wasn't paying attention enough or if I struggled with verbal processing, but I would often be like, what did the teacher say? What are we supposed to do again? Like, and the other students seemed to, you know, have understood, but I was like a bit lost. So I'm gonna say a little. Do you find yourself at ease in romantic situations? No, I wouldn't say so. I wouldn't say I'm comfortable. Do you find it hard to tell the age of people? Actually, no, I'm pretty good at it. And it's like something I like to do is like guessing people's age. I'm usually pretty accurate. Do you pace when thinking or anxious? I do pace a lot when I'm brushing my teeth, when I'm on the phone. I definitely used to do it more when I was younger, but like, yeah, I do pace, yeah. I'm gonna say a little bit because it's not like, it's in very specific situations. Are you still fascinated by many of the things you were interested in when you were much younger? Yeah, definitely. I still have a lot of the special interests I had as a kid. I made a whole video on special interests. Is it important for you to find a unique niche where you can acquire a unique competence? Well, that's a very specific question. I don't know if it's important for me to find a niche. I don't think that's how it works, to be honest, with special interest, if that's what they're referring to. Usually, like, the special interest chooses you. You don't choose the special interest. So I wouldn't say so, no. Do you wring your hands, rub your hands together, or twirl your fingers? So that's an interesting one, because I know it's one of my dad's biggest stims is to wring his hands. He does that a lot, especially when he's like watching TV and stuff. His other big stim is he hums all the time. He's like constantly humming. Twirl, I'm not sure what they mean by twirling my fingers, but I'm gonna say a little because I do have stims that involves my hands and stuff, just not these ones specifically. Do you tend to play the same tune many times in a row? Okay, so that's for people who listen to the same music over and over and over again. I have done that in my life when I was younger, definitely. Do I still do that to this day? Not so much. I'm gonna say a little. Do you find it easy to estimate the age of people? So they asked a similar question that I answered in the first part of this video. Yes, I'm pretty good at estimating the age of people. Do you dislike when people walk behind you? Yeah, I hate that so much. And then like when people walk behind me, it's like I forget how to walk. It's really strange. Do you feel irritated when one person disagrees with what everyone else in your group believes? I don't think I wouldn't say I feel irritated. I tend to be more irritated by people acting like sheep and all believing the same things blindly. That's more irritating to me than one person having their own beliefs. So I'm gonna say no. Do you have difficulty accepting criticism, correction, and direction? So again, that is a repetition. They're testing consistency, I guess. So yeah, I have a little bit of difficulty. I definitely had more difficulty in the past. Do you have an avid perseverance in gathering and or cataloging information on a topic of interest? So that's the famous question from the AQ10. Do you like collecting information about categories of things? The infamous question that everyone hates. So this is phrased a bit better. An avid perseverance in gathering and or cataloging information on a topic of interest. I definitely did that a lot when I was younger. Again, like I feel like I've talked a lot about the burnout that I'm experiencing right now, but the more I think about it, the more I realize that I think I've been in burnout on and off for basically my whole adult life so far. And so my whole adult life so far, I've struggled with my special interests because of my burnout and my mental health has been pretty bad, and so I struggle to be consistent with my special interests and stuff. But when I was younger, as a kid and a teenager, I definitely did that. I would have like whole, documents on my laptop about the things I loved, and like even on my phone I have notes and stuff. So I want to say a little. Do you dislike it when people drop by to visit you uninvited? Yeah, definitely. I just don't like it when people show up out of the blue. I'm like, let me know ahead of time. I have to prepare myself and my house and stuff. Like, to examine the hair of people you like a lot. Why the hair specifically, I don't know, but I would say I do look at hair. I mean, the people I like. I remember as a teen, that reminds me of when I was in high school, I decided to collect, oh my god, that sounds really weird now that I think about it. I decided to collect all my friends' samples of all my friends' hair, and I would compare like the thickness and the color and stuff. I'm gonna say a bit. Have you been accused of staring? Yeah. Like I said, like my partner often says that I look at him very intensely. So yes. I don't answer yes to many of these questions because I want to be as pessimistic. I try to be as pessimistic as possible when answering those tests because I suffer from a lot of imposter syndrome. I tend to think if I feel like I'm downplaying my autistic traits and I still get a very high score, then, to me it's a confirmation that I'm, as if I needed a confirmation because I'm officially diagnosed by a professional, but you know how it is. Do you feel as if you're being persecuted in some way? I definitely had times in my life when I felt that way. I felt like no one liked me or everyone was against me. So I'm gonna say a little. Has it been harder for you than for others to keep friends? Yes, definitely. I don't really have friends at this point in my life. Do you find it easy to keep up with group discussions where everyone is speaking? No, I wouldn't say I find it easy. Do you have difficulties judging distances, height, depth, speed? I wouldn't say so. Do you recognize a lot of people? Yeah, I don't struggle too much with recognizing people. Do you worry your friend doesn't really like you? Yeah, definitely. Like all the time, I'm always thinking like, what do my friends actually think of me? Are they being polite and sticking with me to be polite, or do they really enjoy my company? Things like that. Do you dislike being hugged when you haven't asked for it? To be honest, I don't like being hugged ever. So I would say yes. Do you prefer to learn the character of a potential romantic partner through observation rather than conversation? I wouldn't say I prefer doing it through observation rather than conversation. I still, obviously actions speak louder than words, but I wouldn't say I prefer observation over conversation, no. You find it easier to understand and communicate with odd and unusual people than with ordinary people? Yeah, definitely. I was always friends with the misfits growing up. Do you like being in style? Not at all. Never understood the concept of being in style. Do you need to prepare yourself mentally before going somewhere? Definitely. Like, I always tell my partner, he's often like, let's go to a restaurant, because he has ADHD, so he's like more spontaneous, and he likes to keep things fresh, and he'll be like, let's go to the restaurant. I'm like, whoa, I need at least 24-hour notice before going somewhere. Do you tap your ears or press your eyes when thinking, when stressed or distressed? Tapping my ears and pressing my eyes specifically, like, I've definitely like tapped my ears. I don't think so, but I've definitely pressed my eyes when thinking. I wouldn't say it's something I do a lot. I'm gonna say a little. Do people sometimes think you're smiling at the wrong occasion? that makes me laugh because like that's the kind of thing that my partner does a lot, having, you know, inappropriate reactions to things. I don't think I smile at the wrong occasion. I'm not a very smiley person to begin with. I usually, like, people accuse me of not smiling enough. Not so much not smiling at the right occasion. So I'm gonna say no. Do you find it natural to wave or say hi when you meet people? I wouldn't say I find it natural, no. It takes a lot out of me. Are your eyes extra sensitive to strong light and glare? Yes, definitely. Again, I made a whole video on sensory sensitivities. Do you dislike it when people stamp their foot in the floor? It's not the nicest thing to do. I'm gonna say a little. It doesn't bother me that much. Are you good at teamwork? No. Not really. Do you like tongue kissing? So again, I made a whole video on my sensory sensitivities recently, and I talk about I have an aversion to like body fluids and stuff, including saliva. So I'm not a huge kisser, just like I'm not a huge hugger. So I'm gonna say 1. Do you have to keep an eye out to stop people from taking advantage of you? Kind of, yeah, because I've definitely been taken advantage of before and trusted people that I shouldn't have, and like didn't really notice their intentions. I just realized this whole time I had blue spots on my lips because I ate a blue lollipop last night and it really stained my mouth a lot. Do you notice patterns in things all the time? Yeah. It's one of my main strengths, I would say, is I see patterns in things all the time. I'm like, people will say something to me and I'm like, yeah, that makes sense because you did that, or like that is the same thing that happened in your life when that happened to you, and like it was the same, you did that because you experienced this. Or like I'll make links between things like effortlessly, like it comes to me and people are like, wow, it's crazy that you made that connection. I'm like, no, it's obvious to me. Like, so yeah, I definitely notice patterns in things. I'm always like reading things into car plates, and when I had an electric clock as a child, I was always reading dates and stuff in the time and stuff like that. Do you tend to get so absorbed by your special interests that you forget or ignore everything else? So I'm gonna say a little, because it does happen where I'm like so engrossed in something for several hours in a row and I forget, you know, everything. But as I said, because I've been in burnout for a long while now, it doesn't happen as often as it used to, but definitely when I was younger, yeah, a lot. Do you spend hours overthinking and reenacting negative social interaction? Yes, unfortunately. As a teenager, were you usually unaware of social rules and boundaries unless they were clearly spelled out? I like how they say as a teenager specifically. Maybe a few months ago, I wouldn't really have understood that question. But now that I have a clearer understanding of what social cues are and social rules and things like that, I realize how, like, again, I mentioned that in my video on masking, but I never really tried to fit in that much. I realized pretty early on that I was very different and that I wasn't willing to put the effort into being accepted by people, because most people, I wasn't interested in most people, to be honest. I was more interested in my special interests than I was in people, and I wasn't that interested in fitting in. I didn't really, I guess didn't necessarily realize when I was breaking social rules or missing social cues and things like that. The thing is, with these questionnaires, it requires you to be exceptionally self-aware, I feel like, which a lot of us autistic people are naturally self-aware, but like, I consider myself a pretty self-aware person, and I had to do a lot of digging and thinking when I first started considering I might be autistic. But I would say a little. Do you find it difficult to take notes in lectures? Yes, so I mean, I managed it. Like I said, I did a master's degree, and before that I did a bachelor's degree. I didn't particularly enjoy it, and it was a bit stressful, and it was really hard to understand what I was writing, but I still managed to do it. But I didn't find it very easy, so I'm gonna say 1. In conversations, do you need extra time to carefully think out your reply so that there may be a pause before you answer? Yeah, I definitely, like, I'm not someone who will blurt things out. I like to be precise in my language, in the way I say things, and in like how relevant and accurate what I say is. So I do like to take time to think about what I'm gonna say. Like in these videos, these videos are highly edited because I'm always like pausing and like taking breaks to figure out what I want to say, and like I cut those out because sometimes they're very long. But in conversations, I don't have that luxury. So I will stress myself out to answer quickly to people's questions, because I don't want to seem odd, you know, make it awkward in any way. I'm gonna say 1. Would you quickly become impatient and irritated if you would not find a solution to a problem? Yeah, that's a big problem with me. I get very impatient when things don't work, and like my partner is always telling me how impatient I am. Do you naturally approach somebody you have a romantic interest for? No. Do others often misunderstand you? Yes. They might misunderstand my intentions, or they might misunderstand what I'm feeling because my facial expressions aren't always right. Like I talked a lot about how throughout my whole life people were always telling me, are you okay? You look sad, you look upset, you look angry, and I was like, nope. And that was just because of the face I was making. Do you prefer to only meet people you know one-on-one or in small familiar groups? Yes, definitely. Do you prefer to do things on your own even if you could use others' help or expertise? Yes, I always prefer to do things on my own. Do you enjoy spinning in circles? No, I wouldn't say so. Do you fail to understand pop culture? Things like being in style or why people jump onto the last trend? Yeah, I definitely fail to understand that. Always have. To have one special talent which you have emphasized and worked on. I mean, I don't think I have only one, but yeah, like I definitely had like talent for telling stories, writing stories pretty early on, and that led me to do a master's degree. Same things with languages, things like that. Also, like I was pretty flexible as a kid, and that I really did a lot of gymnastics and like took it pretty far. So I would say so, yeah. Do you enjoy travel? So I'm gonna say 1, because I like the idea of traveling. I like discovering new places, but the whole experience of traveling is very uncomfortable and stressful for me, and usually I need time to recover after I come back from holiday. Do you tend to say things that are considered socially inappropriate when you're tired, frustrated, or when you act naturally? Yeah, it's often happened that I said I was too honest, and like people were like, don't say things like that, you know? So I'm gonna say 1. Do you see your own activities as more important than other people's? I wouldn't say they're more important. No, I don't see them as more important. I'm gonna say no. Do you have trouble reading clocks? No, my partner has a lot of trouble reading clocks, but I don't. Do you have problems filling out forms? Not really. I actually enjoy it a lot. It's something I really enjoy. My partner hates it, so whenever he has to fill out a form or something, he's like, here, do it yourself. I know you like it. It's like a special treat for me. Do you tend to wander off the topic when having a conversation? Yeah, that happens sometimes, even though like I usually have like a lot of things to say about a certain topic, and I'll usually say everything that's on my mind about that topic before I move to another one. But it does happen that like the conversation like it makes me think of something else, and then but I usually come back to it, so I'm gonna say 1. Are you good at interpreting facial expressions? I would say so. Like I've tried those tests online. I don't know how good they are, but those tests where like you have to identify the person's emotion based on their face. I'm pretty good at these. I don't think I struggle that much understanding facial expressions. I do struggle with making them myself though, and I read somewhere that autistic people who watched a lot of movies and TV when they were younger, especially for me, it was a special interest of mine, we tend to become better at understanding people's you know, body language and facial expressions and non-verbal communication and things like that. So I think that's where that comes from. But I'm gonna say 1 because it still happens that I can still get confused by someone's face, but for the most part I'm fine with it. Do you have difficulty describing and summarizing things, for example events, conversations, or something you've read? I'm gonna say 1 because I wouldn't say it's easy for me, but I definitely have a lot of training because of all the studying I did in school, where that was basically the whole thing. Everything I did was like reading stuff and then summarizing it and analyzing it, things like that. So I have a lot of training when it comes to that, but I wouldn't say it's necessarily easy for me. Do you feel that you're a very special or unusual person? Special to me kind of sounds a bit like pretentious, like, oh, I'm very special. But I've always felt different and weird. Unusual, as they say. Do you need a lot of motivation to do things? Yeah, I'm gonna say 1. Do you like to have small talk before getting on to the important topics in a conversation? No, I don't really like small talk. Do you tend to get romantic feelings for people that persistently show interest for you? I don't think so. No. Do you feel an urge to peel flakes off yourself and or others? Well, I mean, that's basically one of my biggest stims is scratching, picking, and biting at my skin, so yeah. Can you easily remember verbal instructions? No, I wouldn't say. I'm gonna say 1 because I wouldn't say that I find it easy to remember. Do you have an urge to jump over things? Same. I'm gonna put 1 for that one. Okay, let's calculate my score. Okay, so 128 out of 200, 96% probability of being atypical, autistic / neurodiverse. So there we go. And then there's the pie with like intellectual skills. It's mostly on the atypical side for me, especially when it comes to people skills and communication and stuff like that. When it comes to perception, I am pretty high on the typical side, but again, like mostly communication, I have a 4 and this is a 6. Again, it's mostly atypical. That's pretty, from what I remember of the scores that I got when I took that tests before, like a few months ago, I got similar results, I think. So this goes more in detail. So atypical talent, a high score is related to autism and OCD, and I have a score of 7.5 out of 10, so above average. Typical talent, I have average. A low score is related to dyslexia and dyscalculia, but also ADHD. So atypical perception, autistic people often have differences in perception. and I have an 8 out of 10, so above average. Typical perception, a low score is related to dyspraxia, and I'm average. Atypical communication, a high score relates to autism, where stims are regarded as repetitive movements. I have an average score. Interesting. Typical communication, a low score is related to autism. Again, I am average, but 3.8 out of 10 is more on the lower side of average, I would say. Atypical relationships, a high score is related to attachment disorders and paraphilias, and I'm above average, so I guess I could look into that. Atypical social, no diagnostic relation, but I have an average score. Typical social, no diagnostic relation, but I'm way below average, 1.7 out of 10. And that's it. Yeah, it's interesting to take these tests again over time, see how they evolve and how my own understanding of the questions changes over time and things like that. Again, like, let me know in the comments if you took those tests, what results you got, if you want to share them. Thank you for liking, watching, subscribing, and commenting. I have a Ko-fi page that I'll link down below if you'd like to support my channel monetarily. And I'll see you in my next video. Bye!